is a CTV News special presentation.
The Year in Politics, a conversation with Premier Scott Moe.
Hello and happy holidays. As 2022 draws to a close, we take time to reflect on the year in politics. And joining me for this special conversation is leader of the Saskatchewan Party and our Premier, Mr. Scott Moe. Premier Moe, thank you so much for taking the time.
Well, thank you for making time.
Now, I want to talk about something that's been top of mind for almost every resident in Saskatchewan, I would say, this year, and that's affordability. When we look at the budget, which was first announced in March, we had a projected deficit of close to $500 million, and then by the time the most recent update came around, it was a surplus of $1.1 billion. So when you look at the relatively strong footing that the province is on financially compared to the cost of living crisis that's facing individuals and households, what would you say to those who insist that the $500 affordability checks just aren't simply enough?
Yeah, I don't disagree. As we're faced with affordability challenges at numerous levels, but the one that we notice is at our own level, or our family household level, and that's what the tax affordability credit checks were to help alleviate in the short term. There's other levels where the inflationary pressures are being felt as well. You know, in our school systems, in our healthcare system. In small businesses across the province as well. And so what we tried to do when our financials markedly increased as we found our way into Q1 and Q2 of this year was, you know, how can we prioritize these dollars to benefit as many Saskatchewan people today and tomorrow as possible. We wanted to repay and prioritize repaying some of the debt that we had accumulated, like other provinces during COVID. $1 billion went to that. We extended some of the tax relief that small businesses had, and it did provide the affordability tax credit checks. We also provided additional investment into healthcare for our human resource recruiting, as well as our education system. We increased by 20 and then another $15 million for a total of $65 million into our classrooms to ensure that those supports are being provided for our children as well. And so the affordability tax credit checks have largely dominated the conversation around the investments that were made with the markedly improved fiscal situation for the province. But there's a number of other areas where that investment, I think in fairness, will be noticed by Saskatchewan families as well.
And we talk about affordability as it relates to maybe balancing your household budget or saving for retirement, but in the meantime, there are an increasing number of residents in our province who are facing extremely dire circumstances. And we've seen municipal governments talking about how to eradicate homelessness, how to help people who are really struggling. We've seen some recent announcements from the federal government in terms of funding the warming shelter to be open overnight here in Regina. What can you say about the province's efforts to address homelessness?
Yeah, we've made investments in this area as well, alongside our community-based organizations and our larger municipalities in the province as well. There was in excess of an additional $1 million that was provided to expand our shelter spaces by over 60 across the province, in addition to what is already present there today. But you know, as we move forward, this is an example of, you know, we talk about growth that works for everyone. This is an example of where we need to work very closely, not only with our municipalities, but some of our community-based organizations on, you know, how are we going to support those that do need a hand up from time to time in our communities, and provide them with pathways to, you know, some of the all too often there's drug addictions that are associated with this, and to provide pathways to the rehabilitation programs that we have in place. And you know, we're starting to get some of that infrastructure in place with the urgent care centers that's being built, one in Regina, one in a partnership with the Takakoop Cree Nation in Saskatoon. Those will have an intake for people that want to make a change in their life and want to enter a rehabilitation program or need a medical health professional, for example, that is providing mental health supports. And so that's the lesser talked piece about those urgent care center investments. But that's one example of investments that are being made by the province, in addition to some of the shelter spaces, in addition to some of the partnerships that we have with municipalities as well as our CBOs. But there's more work that needs to be done, and I would suggest that it's collaborative work that needs to be done with the provincial government involved.
Yeah, when you talk about housing is a provincial issue, and we've heard a lot about Sask housing units that are vacant, and then you hear municipalities talking about needing to build additional units. How can you describe the jurisdictional complications that maybe the average person doesn't understand in terms of just putting people in housing units?
Yeah, it seems very simple, right? And when you get into the details of the housing units, on first of all where they are. Second of all, what type of housing unit they are. Can you put one person in a 5-bedroom house? Can you put a family in a 1-bedroom condo? And so the Saskatchewan Housing Authority, as well as all of the support arms, not only within the provincial government, within our social services network or our health authority, but also the arms that are the contact points that we have with our community-based organizations, are always working closely to make things as accessible as possible. But there are challenges with that, and what we're constantly trying to do is work our way through a number of those challenges so that we can provide adequate supports for everyone that needs them and everyone that desires them.
I think I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, in 2022, pretty much the entire world was grieving with people from James Smith Cree Nation. When we look back at the families of the victims of the stabbing spree over the Labor Day long weekend. As Premier, when you look at that tragedy, does it maybe highlight some opportunities where there are some areas where we can improve as a province, especially when it comes to our justice system maybe, or mental health and addiction supports?
Certainly. Certainly it does. And I talked of the rehabilitation opportunities. We have to have those available so that when an individual makes a choice to make a change in their life, that we actually have the capacity to accept them. And we're working feverishly on that. We have more work to do in that space and to clean up really where those entry points are. And I mentioned the urgent care centers. And so we need to have the capacity and then have the entry points for those supports for individuals that may have entered a life of drug addiction, quite often brought on by some mental health challenges that they may have. And when they're ready to make a change, we need to have that capacity to do so. On the other side, there also needs to be some work done to ensure that our communities remain safe, whether it be the justice system or our policing system. We have today our municipal as well as our RCMP. We're adding to that the marshals, but we're also adding, in full support of the work that they're doing, not to replace the work that they're doing. And we're adding to that and have signed an MOU with the federal government, with Minister Medicino. Minister Tell signed on behalf of the province, and Grand Chief Brian Hardlott from the PAGC, or the PA Grand Council, signed to expand the opportunities for community Indigenous policing services to work. We have the model with File Hills, and we'll look at replicating that in other communities as well. And all in support of ultimately safer communities, and adding to the investment of close to 500 officers that we have added to our RCMP and municipal forces over the last 10 years. We need to continue to add officers into those forces, but then augment and support that with the Provincial Marshal Service, which will be a specialized service, and ensure we have the Indigenous community-based policing models set up in those communities that choose. And so we are going to see a shift in our effort to provide safer communities for families that are living in this province, whether it be La Loche, Meadow Lake, North Battleford, or Estevan.
Yeah, I wanted to get you to expand a little bit on the Saskatchewan Marshal Service, because it is quite a notable piece of legislation for the province. Why did you feel it was important to create a service outside of the RCMP or municipal policing? So
in the same way that municipal policing is directly accountable to the municipality in which they serve, and there is a higher level of accountability, and they work well with the RCMP, they work well with our protection services crew that we have across the province today as well, which is a provincial arm. in that same way of being reactive and responsive to the people of the province, we are going to be setting up this provincial arm of a police force that will work closely with the RCMP and support the RCMP. We'll work closely with the municipal police forces that we have and support those municipal police forces, but also will be responsive to the people of Saskatchewan in communities right across the province. They will be a specialized police force, and in addition to that, we're looking to move into the community Indigenous policing, which will be responsive to those individual communities as well. And so the model isn't new. The model has been, in other provinces, it's been operating really with our municipal police forces for a period of time. But at the end of the day, I would just say this isn't to replace the municipal police forces, and it isn't to replace the RCMP. We've been investing heavily, over 500 officers in both of those over the municipal and RCMP over the last 10 years. What the marshals are there to do is to ultimately make strides towards safer communities by supporting both of these other entities that are already operating in the province.
Okay, this feels like a good time to take a short break, but for those of you at home, stay with us. We'll be back shortly with more from Premier Scott Moe. Welcome back to our year in review. We're talking about the notable topics in Saskatchewan when we look at the year in politics. I'm joined by Premier Scott Moe, and I think it's interesting when you compare our look back at 2022 versus previous years, in that we haven't really mentioned the COVID-19 pandemic very much at all in our conversation, but it certainly has had an impact, and perhaps nowhere is that more clear than in our healthcare system. Whether it be from burnout from physicians and staff working in hospitals or on the front lines, or whether it be people who are waiting longer for surgeries and procedures. So what would you say to people who are growing frustrated and saying they're unable to access the care that they need?
Most certainly, what I would say is there is help on the way to our frontline workers who are absolutely doing a yeoman's amount of work today. Thankfully, we have had a number of good years of recruiting in years gone by where we do have more nurses, we do have more doctors in the province, but it isn't enough, and we need more yet today. And we have put forward our 4-point health human resource action plan. What that is I would say the most ambitious plan that is available in Canada today, and it is going to be landing folks here from other countries this calendar year. It's going to be turning out more graduates this year and in years into the future. And most certainly we need to double down with our focus at the Saskatchewan Health Authority, the Ministry of Health, right up to the Minister's Office as well as the government to ensure that we are bringing people into our healthcare centres to offer and support those that are already there to offer the services that people expect, whether that be our surgical challenges that we have or whether it be some of the emergency room challenges that we have. And this is not unique to Saskatchewan, it is across Canada, but Saskatchewan people should know that this government and our entire health authority are working very hard to ensure the necessary folks are on their way to support our frontline workers, which often are our family and friends in our community.
As you mentioned, it's not a Saskatchewan-specific problem, and we've heard other provinces mentioning some incentives for physicians to go there. How do you make Saskatchewan a desirable location?
Well, most certainly we have put a number of incentives in place as well, and I think I talk with my counterparts on a bi-weekly basis across the nation, and we're all doing what we can to ensure that we're recruiting collectively and we're training collectively as opposed to trying to compete between provinces as we have a national healthcare system. And I would say, in addition to this, thankfully, and I think it's true across the board, that all of the provinces are making the required investment to find our way through this. It won't happen overnight. It is going to take months and into next year. But all of the provinces are thankfully making that investment, and herein lies the opportunity for the federal government to rebase the Canada Health Transfer and ultimately ensure that these investments are sustainable for years into the future and sustain the public health care system that we have in this nation. And so there's opportunities for everyone to be involved as we look ahead, but it is, I would say, the responsibility of the provinces in a provincially delivered healthcare system to ensure that we are attracting people into the profession through our education system, also attracting people to move here from other areas of the world, and less about competing interprovincially.
You talk about the education system. That's another area that's been really impacted by some of the stopping and starting of schools by the COVID-19 pandemic. When you see educators trying to help kids kind of catch up and students sort of struggling with being out sick and that sort of a thing, plus adding the affordability piece to it when school divisions are trying to balance budgets with the cost of living going up. How do you support educators who sort of seem like they have an uphill battle? Yeah, well, the first is, and this is one of the areas we went to first when our financial position improved here in the province was we had a 30 million increase in the original budget. We quickly added 20 to that for inflationary pressures, and then another 15 for some of the enrollment pressures that were coming. And so we have increased the education budget significantly over even where we were on budget day as our financial position improved, and so that investment has been there. But you're right about the interruptions that the kids and students and the teachers, quite frankly, have had to deal with, not only through COVID, but I would say even this fall coming into flu season and some of the other respiratory viruses that are present. I have many nieces and nephews that are young, and there isn't a day that one of them isn't out on the out for the count, but they're finding their way through. But it most certainly has been challenging for all involved in our school system. Credit goes to our educators, and most certainly to our. It is about keeping our students in that environment where they aren't at home alone, but they are out learning collectively with their friends. And playing with their friends and building those relationships, whether it be at school or extracurricular activities. And so there are challenges to this. Credit to the educators, and it's all about the kids. One major piece of legislation looking back on 2022 is the Saskatchewan First Act. That's something that I think those of us in the media have loved to talk about quite a bit. How would you describe, in light of healthcare transfers and some of the federal gun laws, what's the working relationship like at this moment between your provincial government and the federal government? Well, I think there's certain points where we entirely disagree with the federal government, but I'd say in whole we're not disagreeable with working together on items where we can find some substance. The Canada Health Transfer, we would hope, is one of those items. Like the Safe Restart was a couple of years ago. We were one of the earliest provinces, or one of the earlier provinces, to sign on to the child care benefit that the federal government had came out with. We were the first province to sign with Chief Cadmus Delorme the Child and Family Services transfer agreements with Indigenous communities. And so where we can work with the federal government, we most certainly will. Where the federal government is going to wield policy swords around in the area of guising them as environmental protection initiatives, we are going to shield Saskatchewan people and Saskatchewan people's opportunity with an act like the Saskatchewan First Act to ensure that we are going to take up our full provincial jurisdiction as we have it under the Constitution of Canada, which is the very basis of the strength of our nation and has been for decades. But we're going to take up our full jurisdictional ability as a province to ensure that we can continue to develop our natural resources, develop those jobs that are creating wealth in our communities, and understanding that we are producing these products more sustainably than anywhere else in the world. Potash has half the greenhouse gas footprint than our competitors. Field peas are 92% less. Wheat and canola 65% less. We have a great story in Saskatchewan, not only of the food, the fuel, the fertilizer that we produce, but in how we produce that. And we would invite all Canadians to be ever so proud of what we are doing and how we are doing it in this province. Okay, I think we'll take one last short break, but stay with us. We will be back with more on the Year in Politics. Thanks for staying with us. We are here with Premier Scott Moe to talk about the issues that matter most to Saskatchewan residents in 2022. I know sometimes it's an occupational hazard that I tend to focus on the negative or the issues that we need to draw attention to. That's right. Something that we do in the news business, but I'd like to maybe end things off before you give your message to the folks at home by asking you if there's anything from this past year that has you feeling hopeful, anything that's happened that kind of gives you reason to smile. Over the course of this past year, when I see people, coming together, and we've been through a challenging and difficult and at times even divisive couple of years in our
in our nation, in our communities, in our families. And I see people, coming together to start rebuilding on the very foundations of success for this province. And when we work together, we built hockey arenas. When we worked together, we built community halls. When we worked together, we built a community, and we built a province, and we built a nation. And I see that starting to happen again. And when I look at how the world is taking a look and investing actively in our province, and I look ahead to the next generation and a generation after that, Saskatchewan most certainly is going to be the place to be in a bigger way than it ever has before, and it makes me tremendously excited. As I said, I have the best and most rewarding job in the world, and I'm ever so grateful for it.
And finally, before I let you go, I'll step out of the way and let you address the folks at home if there's a message you'd like to pass on.
Well, thank you very much. And I would just say that it has been a tremendously challenging couple of years for us in this province, across the nation and around the world, and some very choppy waters we've been through, and we came through those together. And most certainly, as we look ahead to the next 6 months, year, 3 years, and 5 years, we have every opportunity for success in this province, every opportunity to really participate at a much larger level than we ever have before. We're seeing investments come into our province. We're seeing opportunities arrive in our communities. And we're going to have the opportunity together to really reinvest those dividends back into the very people that live in Saskatchewan. That truly is growth that works for everyone. And I think it's a time for us to remember just what that means at this time of year during the Christmas season. And so I would close with just saying a Merry Christmas to each and every one across the province of Saskatchewan and the nation of Canada.
Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today, and thank you for your service to our province over these past 5 years and in your time before that as well. And to all you at home, thank you so much for joining us, and Merry Christmas to you and yours.